So the equivalent decimal number is 98, and then you can actually Google this up, because I'm not going to actually discuss about the conversion from decimal to binary numbers, but our compiler will take this decimal number and then convert it to a binary string, which the machine will then understand. This will be this can be a wrong one, but you will actually find that you will have strings of zeros and ones for the machine, because our machine can only understand binary digits. Now let's move on to the rest of the data types and the initialization. Now these are quite similar, float and double. The only difference is that double has 8 bytes of space inside the memory, or if we declare a variable with the type double, then it will go back to the memory and it will assign 8 bytes of space for the data. And in terms of float, the float will actually store this data in 4 bytes of memory space. So they don't. So their basic difference lies in their range, because 4 bytes of space will store lesser number when we compare it with 8 bytes of space. So you can store billions of numbers inside 8 bytes of space, but you can't actually store that huge numbers, just as we have discussed. Like you can store trillion. If you are doing calculation with trillions of dollars, then you can use double for the purpose, but you can't use float, because it has got only 4 bytes of space, which means it has a smaller range. But both of these variables, which in my case is called f and d, can store decimal numbers with certain precisions. So what happens if we try to look at what happens behind the scenes? So what it means is that, let me show you. For example, let me take this off. So what I'm doing is I'm actually going back to my previous position. Now let's save this. But before we actually run this program, we need to do something. We are going to check how much of memory space is actually allocated for these individual variables. So how do we do that? And this check will also ensure the difference between the declaration, the variable declaration, and variable definition. So let's do that. The first thing that we are going to do is use the printf function, integer, and include a string, and we are going to include a message inside this string. Integer has some bytes of space. So this is Sizeof. We're going to use the Sizeof operator, or sometimes it's actually also a function, and we're going to pass in I. Now you might get a little confused. You don't have to get confused right now, because I'm just going to show you what's happening behind the scenes when we try to define a variable. Now I'm also going to show you I'm also actually going to discuss about the difference between variable declaration and variable definition. Next is character. Character has bytes of space, size C, and we can copy the entire thing. Now we're going to pass in F, and for this part we will pass in float. then again we're going to pass in D, and lastly this will be double. Now let's build our program. You can do this by clicking Control along with F9, and when your program has been successfully built, then it will show you no error messages and it will show you a success message with the termination. Now we are ready to run or execute our program. So let's run this. So click Control F10. Now we have got something like this. So we need something called, let me add this. Okay, this is a new line character, so you don't have to worry about anything right now. I'm going to explain all of this stuff as we gradually proceed through this chapter. Now let me tell you one easier step. One is this gear symbol is actually a build button, and this play means the run button. But if you want to do both of them together, which is build and run the program at the same time, then you should click on this. So now what we have is integer has 4 bytes of space inside the memory, character has 1 byte of space inside the memory, or it must have been 1 byte of space, float has 4 bytes of space inside the memory, and double has 8 bytes of space. Now what we're doing is we're going back to the memory, and we are telling the memory that Mr. Memory, tell us how much of space that has been assigned inside you for this 4 data types and along with their variable names. So this size of is actually referring to the memory spaces through the variable name. So it's going back to the memory, and it's telling the memory that tell me how much of variable I has got, or how much space has been assigned for this variable I, and then we are displaying it using this format specifier. So now we are going to expand or extend on the format specifier and the filled with specifier. So these two concepts, which are format specifier and the filled with specifier, are actually interlinked. Now we want to store data inside our variable, and we also want to display that data when we want it. Now what I should have told you earlier is that the assignment operator, let's actually rewrite all those values. They can be any arbitrary value.